Matt Lenihan for Boxing Social in association with William Hill, Empire Fight. So I'd like to be joined by middleweight Marcus Morrison. Marcus, how are you feeling? I've just seen Joe. I've said to everyone, you've just been put through your paces. It doesn't look like he's given you a light session today. He's been on every single one here. How are you feeling?
Yeah, good to come to the end of another tough week. Started the week with a very hard session. All the boys, got in on the Monday and it was a grueler. So nice weather to finish the weekend. To start the weekend, and the gym's buzzing, the gym's flying, and good to be back in.
Obviously last night you had that chance against Denzel Bentley for the British. Didn't go your way. Are you looking at sort of making another climb back up to that position where you're able to challenge again?
Yeah, definitely. It's that British title now for me is like, it slipped away once and I can't allow it to happen again. I've got to climb the ladder. I've got to get probably another few fights under my belt before I'm even talked about on the British level and for that British title. But that's the aim, and like I said, I can't come out of boxing or finish this chapter of my life without getting over that British title.
A lot of people say you either win or you learn, instead of saying like that you got beat. But do you know when you take that defeat, does that almost light that fire in you a little bit more to say, you know what, I've got, like you mentioned there, you can't leave boxing, you've been boxing since the age of 7. Is that fire still burn with you that you have to take something out of this game to sort of not validate you but give you that thing inside to say, you know what, I dedicated my whole life to a sport and I've managed to take a title away from it, or take something or fight at a specific arena? Is that what this is for you?
Yeah, it's like if you ask any British fighter, they want to get hold of that British title, and then you look on from then. Once you've got hold of that, but that's your focus, like British title, and it's like a niche that needs to be scratched. Like I can't move on or even look for any other fights before thinking about that British title and a route to get back to that British title. Mm-hmm. So for me, it's just like all guns, aiming for that British title. And like I said, it might be a while off yet, but I'm determined to get back there and pick it up.
You've been in boxing a long time. We had a little chat off camera and you mentioned when you first met Joe and what age you started boxing. When you see sort of how your career has gone up to this point, are you happy? And you're not going to be satisfied, but are you sort of pleased with what you've achieved and sort of the names you've been in with as well so far in your career? You've been in with some big names, not always come out on the side of the result you wanted, but you're managing to mix always at a good level. Yeah,
like boxing. If I hadn't boxed, I wouldn't have met the people I've met. I wouldn't have been the places I've been in. Boxing's given me so much, from being the age of 7. When I was in school, in high school, I was over in Las Vegas. I've been to Vegas a couple of times now. I've been all over, and boxing's taught me so much. So yeah, it's one of them. I couldn't. Well, I say I couldn't ask for much more. It's given me a lot. Give me a good life, and for me now it's just achieving what I felt I could achieve, before turning pro. When I turned pro, it's just getting out of boxing now what I feel I deserve and what I feel I got into boxing for.
If you were to give advice to a youngster, say 7-year-old you, now knowing what you know in boxing, what would the advice be? If you would go back and have that chat with yourself, knowing what you know now, what advice would you give?
It would be to dedicate yourself. Like boxing, it's not something that you can one day in, one day out. It's you dedicate your whole life, and like the saying, you get out what you put in. That's like now, there's never been a saying more true. It's literally you get out what you put in. If you dedicate your life and dedicate yourself to the sport, you'll get the rewards. You'll reap the rewards. And I'm not saying that I've not always been dedicated. It's been a long time, and even when I got to later on in my amateurs, I felt like I boxed forever.
Yeah.
And there gets times when it gets hard and camps are tough, and you have your off days, and it just it's hard to stay motivated at times. Don't get me wrong, you get a good fight and that lights the fire and that motivates you, and it's later on in my career when I got those big fights, that was the fire that burned, and giving the motivation. And there was times when in between those big fights, I was on small hall shows, and they're the sort of fights where it's tough to get up for, and you think, I've just come off fighting on a pay-per-view show against a big name, and I'm back on a small hall, and I've got to try and get motivated for a 4 or 6 rounder. But these things happen, and what you've got to do to get back in the mix if these big fights don't go your way.
Have you ever got to that point in boxing where, I'm speaking to Jose, where he seems like he's had fights and he's like, look, I'm not boxing at this weight anymore, I'm not boxing anymore, and he said, look, if it all went away, he'd get back to a grind and work and provide for his family. Have you ever thought about, or have you ever been in that place where it's like, you know what, forget boxing, I've had enough of it? Have you ever been at that point?
So when Joe always says, like, boxing will give you the highest highs and it'll give you the lowest lows, and them lows are like, they're awful. They really are bad. And at those times you think, you know what, is it all worth it? Like, these lows, and then you'll get a high and it'll be like, right, okay, you forget about the lows. But at the time of the lows, there is times you think, do you know what, it can't be worth these feelings, these emotions of being this low. And yeah, I'm not going to lie and say I haven't. There's probably been times in those lows where I thought, do you know what, I can't go through this again. But the thought of a life without boxing is terrifying. Yeah. It's a scary thought, because without boxing, like I said, I've boxed since being 7. It's all I've ever done. Went to college for a couple of years, dragged my feet through college, but it's all in all, boxing's all I've ever done. And like I said, the thought of not boxing and not having boxing in my life, it's a stressful thought.
How do you manage the emotions of it? Because, like you said, and it's an old saying, but Joe's correct, you get a win on any show, small hall, it's the best feeling in the world. But yeah, even if you have a bad performance or you suffer defeat, it'll feel like you're hitting rock bottom. How do you find that middle point where at the top of your height you don't come crashing all the way to the bottom and you sort of keep level grounded? Or is it something you still work out now?
Yeah, I don't think any fighter can ever work out. You see boxers at the top level that have been at the pinnacle, the very highest point of the sport, and they come away from the sport and they reach some real lows. And I think it's just a case of trying to manage it yourself and balance the highs and the lows, because once you come off a high, you're looking to chase something even bigger. It's like, I'd imagine, a drug addict, once you have that first hit, it's like you want more, you want higher highs. But again, the opposite end of the spectrum, you've got the lows, and luckily when I've had those lows, I've had a good family, good friends around me to keep me going and get me through them. And without that, maybe I would have, kicked boxing to the curb, and I thought, nah, not for me. But I've had good family and friends to get me through it, and yeah, I'm still here.
In terms of life after boxing, have you ever thought about, obviously Joe's training, have you ever thought about that side of it, or what comes after, or what you'd like to do? Not saying you're anywhere near retiring, you're still in good shape, you're in big fights still, but do you look and think, what, when I'm done, I'd like to manage fighters, I'd maybe like to train a fighter? Does these thoughts ever cross your mind?
Yeah, I think all boxers, I've got to look for something to do after boxing, because once you've not got boxing in your life and you retire, you've got many years of, like, probably what would feel like a hole with nothing to do, and you're sort of stuck in no man's land. And I've actually just been on my trainer seconds course literally the other day, so yeah, that's there if I want to go into that. And there's a good chance I will want to stay in boxing in some form, and coaching, managing, helping Joe out, I think would be a good step. And once my career is over, I don't know when that'll be. I feel like I've got plenty of big fights left in me still, and plenty still left to achieve. But that's there for if I do want to pursue that. And you know, I think you in boxing as well, unless you make these, you know, multi-million pounds and, you know, you Canelos of the world where you're making 30 million a fight, 50 million a fight and this and that, you've got to be smart, you've got to invest well, and you've got to do something with what you make in your career, because, you know, a lot of fighters have found out the hard way and it will soon run out, and, you know, you can have all the titles you want on your mantelpiece, but if, you know, you've not done something with your money, and you can find yourself in a tough place.
I know Floyd Mayweather's sort of an exception to the rule in terms of how much money he's made, and, you know, there's reports of him net worth being over $1 billion in like real estate investments, but he always used to say belts only collect dust, and that's, I suppose it's a bit cynical, because like you said, like a British title to you would mean the whole, that it would probably mean the world, wouldn't it? And it would open doors for big fights. But what do you make of them comments? Is there an element of truth in that when you look at it in terms of belts just collect dust, it's checks that put food on the table kind of attitude?
Yeah, definitely. I think, you know, when you turn pro, you think, right, forget the money, let's just get a good career, pick up some titles, and for some people titles would mean the world, but like you said, they don't feed mouths. And, you know, I think now if you went back to a few pros, ex-pros that have retired, and they've got titles, they've got belts on the mantelpiece, they've got British titles, European titles, and some of them, I honestly believe, won't have all that much in the bank, and they'll still be struggling. And I think if you said to them, look, I'll buy that belt off you for X amount, I think they'd be quick to snatch your arm off. Yeah. But yeah, it's finding that middle ground, what you're happy with, and listen, for me now, like, I want titles. I'm back with that fire where I want titles, and I want the British title and big fights. And I'm not a stupid fighter. I've done a few things, yeah, away from boxing, which will hopefully stand me in good stead. And I'm quite comfy, and I can look and concentrate on picking up titles.
Well, that's positive that you've obviously used the sort of wealth that you've gained from boxing to put into other avenues to maybe, you know, keep you going whilst you're still training in this, cause it's a brutal sport. Look, Marcus, I appreciate your time. You give us a bit of an insight there on sort of the highs and lows in boxing, and obviously what you're still wanting to achieve, which is British title. We wish you all the best for that, and when you get your next fight date announced, we'll catch up with you on Fight Week. So appreciate you talking to Boxing Social, and we'll catch up again.
So, man, thank you very much.